Catherine from Knit the Stars, and welcome to another video in my Knitting Unravelled series. Today, we'll be learning how to knit in the round. Knitting in the round just means that instead of working back and forth in rows to create a rectangle as we've been doing, you're going to knit around in a circle to create a tube. This is a really important skill for more advanced projects like hats or sweaters. One special thing to note is that when you're working in the round, instead of calling each completed repeat of stitches a row, you're going to call it a round. The supplies you need for working in the round are different than the ones we've been using so far. Instead of using straight needles, we're going to be using something called circular needles. These look like regular knitting needles, but they're connected at the ends by a flexible cord. You can buy circular needles in all different lengths depending on the circumference of the item you want to make. You can also use circular needles as you would straight needles to work back and forth in rows. This is especially helpful if you have a bigger project like a blanket that won't fit on straight needles because the cord helps give you that extra length. You'll also want to have a stitch marker. This is a small piece you slip onto your needle between stitches so you won't lose track of where your round starts and ends. You can buy stitch markers at most craft stores, but makeshift markers like paper clips, hair ties, loops of scrap yarn, and safety pins will work just as well, as long as you make sure they can fit onto your needle. Let's get started. You're going to begin by holding one end of the circular needles in your right hand and the yarn in your left, as you usually would, and casting on normally. Continue casting on until you have enough stitches to cover the entire length of your needles and the cord. Recall that if you were working flat in rows, at this point you would turn your work over to begin your first row. Instead, we're going to keep the needle with the tail and working yarn in your right hand, and bring the left one up and around to meet it so your needles form a circle. If your cast-on edge is at all twisted, make sure to get those twists out now so the same side of the edge is facing you all the way around. Otherwise, your work will be twisted once you join in the round. Now, pick up your stitch marker and slip it over the tip of your right needle so it rests right next to the last stitch you cast on. Pick up the working strand in your right hand and knit the first stitch from your left needle normally. You've now joined the first stitch you cast on to the last stitch you cast on, which is what creates the round. Your stitch marker should be resting in between the last and first cast on stitch, and it tells you where to stop when you've made a complete round. Continue knitting across the round until you get back to the stitch marker. When you get to the end of the round, instead of turning your work as you would if you were working flat, you're just going to slip that stitch marker off of your left needle and onto your right needle and begin knitting a new round starting with the first stitch. As you continue to knit in this manner, you'll start to see that tube shape forming from working in the round. It's important to note that when you're working in the round, the right side and wrong side of your work will look a little bit different than when you're working flat in rows. When you knit rows, you'll work a right side row, then turn your knitting and work a wrong side row. In the round, because you never turn your work, every round you work will be a right side round. This means that you can make stockinette stitch by knitting every single round instead of purling every other row. To make garter stitch in the round, you'll need to knit one round and purl the next round as you would to make stockinette stitch when working flat. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you'll follow along with the rest of my Knitting Unravelled series.